hearing impaired. Mr. Hobson, who's sitting in the front row, if you'd stand up, Mr. Hobson. He has brought some assistive listening devices which you can borrow, and it may help you hear the meeting a little bit better. And if you'd like to borrow one, come and see Mr. Hobson and he'll outfit you. I think you need to sign something so we know who's got them, though. I'd like to make another announcement regarding people who have served the town for some time and have left committees. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, and all the citizens of Acton, the Volunteer Coordinating Committee would like to recognize and thank the following people who have completed their terms of service on a town board or committee. As I read the names of the people, please stand and remain standing until I've finished reading the names. There are about 15 of them, I would guess, and then we will give them a round of applause after the last name is read. First person is Robert Cohn from the Conservation Commission, Charles Carlson from the Conservation Commission, Francis Dormurat of the Historical Commission, George Emmons from the Board of Health, Marianne Grothier from the Minuteman Home Care, Lisa Harsip, Acton Boxborough Arts Council, Marianne Kiley, Council on Aging, Dave Lunger, Fort Devon's 2nd Airports Task Force, Doug Miller, Board of Health, Suzanne Miller, Board of Assessors, Wesley Mowry, Cemetery Commission, William Mullen, Finance Committee. Gee, Bill, I'm going to have to stand up here tonight. Penny Pitts, Acton Boxborough Arts Council, Nancy Rembert, Acton Boxborough Arts Council, Valerie Spotko, Acton Boxborough Arts Council, Lawrence Story, Historical Commission, and finally Marianne Tavares, Historical Commission. Thank you very much for your service to the town. Okay. We have one other announcement. There's a long service to the town, and if Mary Larson would stand. She is the town accountant, and she's retiring next August after 23 and a half years service. Mary, where are you? Wave. Thank you, Mary. Now, as I recall, we voted the amendment positively last night, and so now we are back on the main motion, and it is open for discussion. The major presentations have been made, and I believe the budget article, as amended, is open for general discussion by the town meeting members. I will recognize first I'll recognize the gentleman at the back first. I think you were standing first, sir. Microphone 5.
Yes, my name is John Benson of 21 Deacon Hunt Drive. I had hoped to speak briefly last night, and in the aftermath of the vote, I had a few comments that I wish to make. I had enthusiastically supported the override on March 30th. I was very troubled by the process last night and the precedent that we established. I fear it'll be very divisive, and it's going to bring out the worst of people in this town over the next couple of weeks as we go into an override. Contrary to Greg Jarbo's notion of what a town meeting is supposed to do, I don't feel that it's the role of 1,500 people at a town meeting to substitute its judgment for the vote of 4,700 citizens who voted in a town-wide election 30 days earlier on the exact same issue. Now, I agree with Mr. Hunter, who sees an override as an essential part of our process for the next several years or more out. I believe we can't look to the Commonwealth to bail us out. They don't have any money either. And if anything, if you look at the legal cases that are working their way through the state courts around the country, the Supreme Courts, and there's one case pending before the SJC here, where they want to level fund all school districts. So to make Acton and Concord equal with Revere and East Overshoot. So there's not going to be any more money coming to us. We have to solve our own problem. Now, I think the key issue is how we determine the amount that we set as our overrides. With the various town boards, I missed that issue this year. I don't believe we're the Tony suburb that the Boston Globe pretended us to be. We're a socioeconomically diverse group. And I think in all future overrides, we have to be mindful of our senior population who live on fixed incomes. We have to recognize that there are all too many people in this town who are out of work. There are many people in this town who are scared about whether or not they're going to have jobs in 4 months or 6 months. Now, I believe it's not in our interest to revisit overrides in the future under the guise of quote-unquote compromise. Those seniors who came out on that awful night last night never should have have come out to preserve the vote that they prevailed on several weeks ago. And let's all keep that in mind. Thank you.
Mr. Cady.
Bill Cady.
Microphone 2.
Bill Cady, Strawberry Hill Road. To answer some of the questions that some of the people had last night, now that we've had some time to think about the vote, we have to answer to the people who are going to, assuming there is a override vote in the next 45 days. I'd like to ask, and I think people would like to hear what the intentions are of the use of the funds. So I'd like to ask two questions, one of the town and one of the school. I'd like to ask Bill Ryan if he would come forward and please give us an explanation as to what his recommendation as the current administrator of the school system, who's been working as the most cost-effective school member we have, considering what we voted him in terms of a pay raise, or they voted for a pay raise, and he served an entire year as superintendent. And I'd like to see if you would please give us what your recommendation to the school committee would be, so that we can have an explanation and understanding tonight as to what you would likely to do with the funds if assuming they were passed. And then I'd like Don Johnson or the selectman, Nancy, if you would tonight indulge us with your recommendations as to what you would recommend how the money be allocated. I think it's important that people understand and have some general understanding before your official vote, as the selectmen and as the school committee, as to where these monies would go, and that will have a major impact, and it'll be in the papers, and people will be able to discuss and decide where we're going to go for or against the override.
Mr. Cady has asked a question. Are you prepared to respond to it? Do you wish to respond to it? Fine, go ahead. Mr. Ryan. He's not speaking yet.
If I understand the question, Bill, it is what would the administration's recommendation be if indeed the amendment that were passed last night and there is another override, what we would put back in the budget. For the local schools, that number was $207,130 in the amendment last evening. For the regional schools, the number was $259,961. For the region, it becomes a little more complicated because we do have an assessment, and that assessment has already been voted. So there was an amendment to put some additional money there. But if one were to assume that a similar kind of thing occurs in Boxborough now, and Boxborough comes up with their share, that would be approximately another $53,000 for the region. So we'd be looking at $207,000 for the local schools and about $313,000 for the region. As Nancy mentioned last evening, the school committee has not taken a position. The regional school committee will meet next Thursday. We will have a recommendation to the regional school committee of what the administration recommends in terms of putting back into the budget, if indeed a subsequent override were to pass. The following week, the local school committee meets. We will have a recommendation to the local school committee, but I can give you an idea of what my recommendation will likely be. At the local level, we had, as you know, a variety of cuts, but some of the cuts were 6 classroom teachers at the elementary level. I think it's likely that my recommendation and the administration's recommendation would be to put back 5 or 6 of those classroom teachers, grades 1 through 6. And some of the support services to have some type of modified merit, because our space problem is not going away. If you look at the handout that we have, again in 1987 we had 1,610 children in the Acton public schools. Next year I think the number is around 2,140. So we clearly have to have a solution, both a short-term and a long-term solution to the space problem. So my recommendation likely will be to restore 5 or 6 of those elementary classroom teachers and some of the support services for a solution to our space problem of some sort of a modified merit. At the regional level, we actually met this morning both with Cliff Card, who's the junior high school principal, and Steve Donovan, the high school principal, and came to pretty much a consensus of what we'll recommend next week to the regional school committee. If you looked at our cut list, we had 3 levels of cuts. We had a bunch of 1s that came to about $500,000, a bunch of items that were all 2s that came to $500,000, and then 3s that came to $500,000. Basically, we would be restoring most of the 3s and most of the 2s, many of the 2s, a few 1s, but primarily what we would be restoring would be classroom teachers and support services, both for the junior and senior high school. We would not be putting back any cuts that were in the administrative area. That would not be our recommendation, or any of the support in that area. So it would primarily be restoring teachers and support services, both at the junior and senior high school, that really relate to the academic program. In addition to that, I think it's likely that some of the cuts that we had had eliminated the funding for junior high school sports and freshman sports and some of the junior varsity sports. It's likely that we'd be recommending to put back in the funding for junior high school sports and probably the JV sports, but not the freshman sports. So that's what you will likely see is the recommendation coming from the administration.
You can use the, okay.
I'm well aware that you can't read this. In fact, let me get a hard copy. I'll read it to you. When we prepared our budget in January, we prepared a list of cuts in priority order, and that became the B budget. We have not reconsidered that priority order at this time, and our B budget, of course, reflected those cuts. Unless the board reconsiders the policy at some future time, you can assume that we would restore any funds in the same order that we cut them, but from the bottom up. That being the last thing that we cut would be the first thing to be restored. What we have on this overhead, of which you cannot read the words, are two dark lines. The bottom line was where the line that was drawn with the $465,000 cut, making the B budget. And that line came right before cuts to the building department, highway department, fire department, and police department. If $219,000 were restored to our budget, it would carry it all the way up to the top of this page, and from the bottom up, I will tell you what those items are. Restore a full-time planning department staff person, a full-time memorial library staff person, a replacement of the engineering van, replacement of the highway superintendent's car, an additional traffic signal on Route 62, or a traffic signal. It's not additional on 62, there is none. Funding for the computer study, 11% of highway funding, highway paving funding, 29% of the funding for building and ground maintenance, 22% of the funding for municipal property overtime, funding for the computer-aided design system upgrade, and funding for new sidewalks. That's what would be included in that list. Now, there are lots of ifs, of course, one being whether or not there will be a special election, another will be if an election vote would prevail. And the really big if is that we have 2% salary guidelines this year, and if any of the collective bargaining units settle at a higher than 2% rate, cuts will be made in the budget to accommodate that. So this is purely speculative, but you can assume that we would restore the cuts in the same order that we took them.
I recognize the gentleman at microphone 3.
Hi, my name is Jim Moss. I live at Mohegan Road. I'd like to address a couple of points. Past citizens in Acton had the foresight to improve our schools, and your efforts have certainly paid off. Now, I believe, is the time to ask ourselves some questions about the future. What level of performance is acceptable relative to the cost? Mediocre isn't my acceptable level, but out of sight isn't either. And how can we continue to pay for our vision? Consider some of the results of a superior school system. We'll have higher property values? Maybe. More taxes? Probably. Better educated students? A population explosion which might not be taxable in a linear manner, and the forcing out of citizens incapable of paying taxes. In fact, you, in later years, could be forced out of town on a financial rail. Consider the old, the infirm, the retired, the unemployed, and all of those living on a fixed income. The time has come to pass most of the burden of education onto those who are using it. Let me respectfully suggest the following strategy for future health of our community. Each household should pay a base tax which supports the town endeavors. To this base amount should be added an additional fee for each child attending school. This way, households without children, such as the elderly, will be protected against high taxes, and those that move here for the schools will pay for what they receive. I would suggest, for those of you who supported the override and were not pleased that it did not pass, donate the amount of money that you would have been taxed to the town. I'd like to ask the school committee, Why did you cut your clerical, your support, and your custodial staff, and then raise the salary of your principals? I have another point as a concerned parent to the school committee. I'm not willing to authorize one more dollar to the school budget until parents of school children receive regular, mailed information about their child's education progress and other important parental information, such as meetings. During their junior and senior high school years, as a parent who wants to participate, I have found the lack of information most frustrating. I belong to a small parent group of about 25, and most parents have found that also true. Did you really expect the students to carry home the information you gave them? I'm willing to donate $4 or $5 to cover the mailing expense. Maybe some other parents would care to join me.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You probably meant that money for me. Is that right? I'm not too proud to take it. You know. That was just symbolic. No, Art. Give it to Art. He needs it. Finance Committee needs it. I'm going to recognize the gentleman in the back, and then, Charlie, I'll recognize you.
My name is Bob Evans. I live on 43 High Street. I was concerned last night on the municipal budget about several things. We heard from the Finance Committee that somehow the proportion of our funds which have gone to the municipal as opposed to the school needed to be changed to give the municipal more money, and then suddenly we see that the municipals choose to tell us that they are hiring a number of new positions, whereas when the schools came up, they were laying off a number of people in order to be consistent with the B budget. Perhaps these people are needed on the town side, but I was certainly not convinced by what we heard, and I think partly it was because in an earlier era, all new positions would have appeared before us as specific warrant articles, not buried in the budget, and we could have then debated whether in fact we needed a new financial head. We could have discussed particularly whether a personnel director who was ostensibly to help the town manager is needed when, if you follow the beacon and deal with the town on personnel matters, you know that a significant portion of the personnel matters are done by the assistant town manager. And so one wonders what he's going to do. Perhaps all of his time is now going to Neswick. And perhaps the most troubling thing is Article 17, which follows Article 10. It deals with the West Acton Library, in which I have never set foot, but presumably under the B budget it will not be funded, and it was not mentioned in that long list of things which Mrs. Tavernier read, and indeed additional books for the regular library would not be apparently added back in if we pass the second override. It seems to me that fundamental decisions about the library services relative to other parts of town services should be debated and decided at town meeting, and we should not be presented with an accomplished fact and have little or nothing to do except to vote a dotted line. Now, I considered at length whether to offer formal amendments to pull things out of that budget and stick them into warrant articles. I think the town moderator and legal counsel would probably tell me that I was creating a mare's nest. And so tonight, I shall not do that, but I would like to suggest that if somehow town meeting is not brought back into the town decision process, then in future years it may be necessary to make a mare's nest in order to exert our role in deciding what the town is going to do.
Mr. Cadillac.
Son, thank you. Mr. Evans has said just about half of what I plan to say, so I won't repeat it. The idea of a line item budget seems to have acquired a life of its own, and I think by next year's town meeting, we shall have one, and all those interested, we will work on it, because I think that's exactly the correct thing. I have a question to the selectmen. How do we affect your list of priorities that we have just seen? How do we do something at this point, assuming we are willing to vote for the override for the extra $687,000, but perhaps don't think that a traffic light is as important as the West Acton Library? How do we go about convincing you of that at this point? Could I have an answer?
Mrs. Tavernier.
Well, we have open meetings held every other week. We're on TV, and I know you do watch. We started our discussions in October and full public meetings on these new personnel positions. They were discussed in coordinating committee, which are open public meetings. Coordinating committee and the finance committee approved the positions that have been mentioned, the finance positions. You have ample opportunity to give input to the selectmen as to their priorities if they differ from yours. And that includes from this point until the end of the fiscal year, too.
Mr. Cadillac.
Well, fine, then I would encourage everyone here to come to the Board of Selectmen meetings from now on, and we will attempt to set the priorities to a different order than apparently they now exist. I would also ask at this time if we could have a total number of employees that presently exist at the municipal side and an explanation of whether we actually increasing, and if so, by how many positions. Let's stick to the B budget. Let's forget this supplemental budget for a minute to make life simple. Could I please know how many employees are being added and or deleted, and the rationale for those specific positions? Because I completely agree with Mr. Evans that this is exactly the sort of thing that in years past the town meeting had an opportunity to at least know about.
Well, I think that I'd only ask you to answer the question you asked.
We have 137 FTEs.
I think that's full-time equivalent, if I'm not.
Sorry, yes.
It's not a real person.
Could
Looks
be.
like one, though.
Right.
Is that the answer to you?
Well, that's the existing number. Are we increasing that number or decreasing it? What happens between this current year and the proposed B budget?
May I show the overhead of the new positions that I showed last night? These three positions, tax collector and two finance clerks, are the three positions that were approved by coordinating committee as new growth for the town. We had originally proposed a computerization of all of the financial aspects of town hall, which would greatly have enhanced our revenue collecting abilities. However, due to the size of the shortfall, we agreed to cut back on our request, to put in a computer study instead, to come up with hard figures on exactly what software, hardware, and other needs would be. And coordinating committee, school committee, and finance committee agreed that we could maintain this new growth number, personnel number of $88,000, and that is those three positions. And I would point out, as I did last night, the main purpose of these three positions is to collect all of the revenue of the town that goes primarily for education.
Wasn't there another one that you showed yesterday?
Yes, those are not new. In fact, only one of these is a new position, new, absolutely new. In fact, the only new position in the budget that required new money is the finance clerk, because the other two positions were cut, but they were existing positions up until 1990. And then when the town took the first round of cuts, those positions were cut, tax collector and a finance clerk. And due to problems that have surfaced this year in the efficiencies of the finance area, we realized we have to put these back. The workload doesn't drop in certain departments in the town, and the finance department is one area that it doesn't drop. In fact, it increases every year because of new state regulations, new types of revenues that have to be collected, new number of new taxpayers. I mean, that is one job that the workload continues to increase every year. So you want to see the other two?
Well, yeah.
All right, the first one is personnel director. Listed here are the duties of the personnel director. Now, if you recall, last night I explained that this too is not new money. When we're given our total town allocation, we decide within that allocation how much will be for capital, how much for operating budget. So within that allocation, we have realigned and moved money around to create funds for these two positions, personnel and senior center staffing. The personnel director, here are some of the duties, the principal duties that a personnel director would do. Collective bargaining. Up until about 3 years ago, we were able to bargain multi-year contracts.
Mrs. Tavernier, excuse me. Do you want this detail to answer your question?
I don't.
Or do you just want the number?
No, I'm all set on that, and as I counted, we are adding 5, so we're going from 137 to 142.
Well, we're also losing some.
Well,
That was in the reduction list. We're losing 1, 2, and it's some 3. And when we use overtime figures, do we actually calculate full-time equivalents in that? Do you know what I would say we're losing about 6 full-time equivalents from other departments.
these are actual people that won't be there next year?
Well,
Is that
3
what
of
you
them
mean?
are actual people, and the others are overtime funds, which have the effect of reducing personnel.
Okay, I won't belabor it, Mr. Moderator, but I think the point is being made that all of these things are the sort of information that would work much better if town meeting had a chance to understand it. I'll make a plea for better information once again, and I won't restrict it to the municipal side.
Thank you.
The schools have their problems, even though they give us a handout which is quite comprehensive, and I urge everybody to study it, because you will find in it things like some of the references to cuts are really reductions from proposed increases, which is different from a cut. The B budget, the classroom teachers at the elementary level would decrease by 1, not by 6, and so on. My plea is, please give us good, complete, full information. This is all the truth, but it is not the whole truth. One more simple point. There is $468,000 being spent by the regional school system, which does not appear in this budget. It's the choice money. This is the sort of information the voters of this town should be given, not only when they ask for it, but in this handout, so that we have the confidence that the information we're looking at is all of it, that we don't only get the information if we are clever enough to ask the right question.
I recognize the lady at the front microphone. Microphone 1.
My name is Marilyn Leeds. I live on Bromfield Road. I've been a resident and a taxpayer in Acton for 11 years, and I've benefited from many of the services, most notably probably the snow plowing and the mosquito control. But this is the first year that we've been privileged to benefit from the school system. I'm finding it very distressing that many members of the community who perceive themselves no longer at need of different services, be it the schools, be it the West Acton Library, or any other part of the budget, are using that in opposition to support of all of these services which are truly essential to maintain the quality of life in our community. I do hope the one message that comes across tonight is that whatever funding may be restored, whatever may be preserved, will benefit all members of the community in Acton, whether directly or indirectly. Everybody needs to recognize that the enemy here is not the people who are opposed to an override or the people who are in support of an override vote. There was an article in last week's Worcester magazine. I think Kenneth Moynihan said it very well when he said that it is truly Proposition 2.5 that is murdering our cities and towns. And he goes on to explain how the limitations of 2.5 just simply do not enable the communities to keep pace with inflation. I think everybody in this room, whether in favor or opposed to an override right now, recognize this is not a permanent solution to the financial problems of this community, that as long as Proposition 2.5 is in place, that these issues will come up again and again. But Mr. Moynihan goes on to suggest that at the very least the legislature needs to change Proposition 2.5 so that it can keep pace with inflation. I would argue differently, and I think there is an important role for every individual in this room, whether they're concerned about the services in this community or concerned about the rate of taxes that they're paying, that there are two things that everyone in this community must look to do. The first is to look for legislative change to ensure that the financial support for such essential services as education are not coming solely from such an inequitable system as property taxes. That's not an appropriate way to finance such essential services as education. And much of that work has to come at a legislative level. Unfortunately, there is no other way. The other thing that people can do, and it's been alluded to by several individuals in this room, is to look at the total town budget. And while I don't necessarily agree with the suggestion that was made earlier of an assessment on households with children, then you might just as well have an assessment on the households who use the library or anything else, but that we really need to dissect the budget and determine if there are in fact certain parts of what is currently being supported through the tax base that can be separated out and supported through user fees and other mechanisms. And I would urge that no matter which way people vote tonight, that they become involved in the dialogue on both of these issues to support this change. In the meantime, I would still urge that in order to preserve the quality of life and services in this town, that as an interim measure, this override vote still be supported.
I recognize the lady at microphone 3.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Campbell. I live at 21 Minuteman Road. I've also lived in town for, at this point I've had a child in the school since 1984. I have 3 children. I was laid off from my job 2 years ago. I used up my unemployment benefits. I'm working part-time. I've cleaned houses. I've done whatever I could to earn money. I supported the first override. I support this override. I also agree that there has to be some way to protect those citizens of this town who cannot afford increased taxes, and I would like to seriously propose that we try and look into a way for those people who can afford to donate to a fund that would supplement tax revenues for people who are seriously unable to pay their taxes. But I would hope that this meeting doesn't go on too long, because I was up until midnight last night, and I think most of us were. And I hope you can support the budget as amended. Thank you.
I recognize the gentleman at the back at microphone 4.
Good evening. My name is Scott Anderson. I live on Old Stone Brook, and I feel like I'm somewhat the odd man out here for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't have any children, so talking about the school system, I feel strange that I'm going to stand up and be an advocate for spending a lot of money on something that I don't have any children, I'm not going to get any direct benefit from, but I'm going to do so nevertheless. But one of the questions that I had is, I hate to break up this whole feeling like we're at a stockholders meeting, because that's the way it's starting to feel. There's lots of, the board of directors are up there getting assailed, and the stockholders are out here not happy with how their money is being spent. I'm wondering where the consumers are. Is the student council president here? Are there any high school students here that, I mean, these are the people we're talking about. Yeah, raise your hands. How many of them are here? They can't vote. They're not allowed in here. Well, that's really unfortunate, because I'm very interested to hear what they might have to say. I mean, they're the people that this is all for. You know, I mean, yes, we have to pay the money, and yes, I, like many others, are concerned about the elderly and people on fixed incomes, people that have lost their jobs, people who might be in trouble, but we're the students, and how come we don't hear that particular part of this, since I think that's equally important with everything else? And I guess the question that I have, and only everybody here in the audience can ask, those of you who have had children, did you sit down and talk to your children about this? And what did they say?
That's a rhetorical question.
Of course it is, and I'm going to stop here, but I guess even if you don't have children in the school system, and if you did at one time, and if you were ever a child yourself, it's hard for me to remember back that far, but I think I was. If I was given a choice of kicking in a little bit of my allowance to help this override pass, and if my parents had given me that choice, I would have said yes. How many of your children would have done that? And if and if you feel like, if you feel ashamed because if you are capable of paying and you're just saying no because you don't want to kick in a little more of your allowance, then I think it's time to reflect. So I hope that you'll support this to whatever extent that you can. Thank you.
Gentleman at the middle microphone.
Bert Schaefer, Flack Road. There have been an enormous number of statements made which I think need commenting on, but I don't want to equal Mr. Cadillac's length. I must say at the beginning that this is the first time in the 31 years I've lived here that that I have a substantial area of agreement with Mr. Cadillac, which amazes me. One is, I think there is a clear feeling that...
Excuse me, can you hear Mr. Could you just stand a little closer? Thank you. Great.
I think there is a clear feeling that this community is not satisfied with voting ups and downs on big chunks of money like omnibus budgets, and I would add my voice to the fact that I would like to see a return to line items. They don't have to be for every pen and pencil, but they should be reasonable chunks on which voters can make independent decisions. Number two, I also am unhappy with the way information is presented. It seems to me that the people who put together these handouts and reports do a very professional job, use very professional terminology, attempt to be very terse and complete, and leave a lot of people not knowing what on earth is going on. Frankly, I don't want to know about full-time equivalencies. I'd like to know how many teachers are teaching this subject, how many teachers are teaching that subject. I cannot relate what staff is doing by your giving me a number of full-time equivalencies. There are lots of pieces of information that are of this sort, and I would ask the people who put them together, instead of seeing themselves on one side of the table and the town meeting on the other, to ask if they were sitting in the audience having to make decisions on what was being presented, what would they like to be able to see and comprehend easily, because I don't think that's being done. I'm unalterably opposed. In fact, I think it strikes at the very heart of community to have this notion of, I will pay for schools if I have children in them, or I will pay depending on how many children, or I will pay to have my road plowed, but not your road plowed. There cannot be a community if divisiveness and me firstness gets to that point. Things have to have a community base. At the same time, I think we are hearing what is a very old battle between people who can afford to pay and people who cannot afford to pay. I think that there needs to be a new formula in town, which is not simply based on what property you own, but on what your ability to pay is. I neither want to sacrifice quality nor drive people who have lost their jobs or are on fixed incomes or are elderly out of town. So I think those are the three major things that I would like to comment on. Thank you.
Again, as last night, I would just ask if you'd hold your applause, if you wish to applaud, until a person is finished as opposed to interrupting the speech. Thank you. Gentleman at the third microphone.
Yes, Mr. Moderator? Mr. Moderator? Yes, Dick Swenson, Newtown Road. I made some observations this past year after grumbling at previous town meetings about the lack of a line item budget. The observations were...
Yeah, would you just, Mr. Swenson, just a little closer to the microphone, please? Thank you.
I made some observations this past year after grumbling at previous town meetings about the lack of a line item budget. I observed granite curbstones installed on Main Street. I observed expensive concrete sidewalk installed on Main Street. I observed undermanning in our fire stations, curtailment of library services. Now, these deal with priorities. And it's obvious, maybe it was a federal grant or state money that paid for the curbstones. But that needs to be explained. It's obvious that the priorities are different for different people. And the priorities that have been used in this town are certainly different than many of us here at town meeting. I think the solution is we've got to go back to the line item budget and let us decide on these priorities, because we're not happy with what's been done in the past.
Gentleman at microphone 5.
Yes, John Benson, Deacon Hunt Drive. I would like to address my comments to this school committee, both local and regional. I'd like to preface my remarks. My wife is Pam Lynn, and she's Social Studies Department Chairman in the high school. And under this package, her position as a department chairman, along with all the other department chairmen in the junior and senior high schools, are all being eliminated. I'm not here talking about the $4,000 stipend that we receive for that, because we'll do all right without that, fortunately. But I'm here to address the issue of real central office administrative cuts. What we saw in the presentation was what they call 3.2 full-time equivalents. What this consisted of is a secretary, a receptionist who's retiring and her position is not being refilled, a bits and pieces of a maintenance man, a foreman, and an attendance monitor, and bits and pieces of other people. They're not administrators in the sense that we all know, but that's what they're carried on up there as. What remains in place, and I like Bob Kessler, was his cabinet, 7 men. This consists of a business manager, a coordinator of business, a director of personnel, a coordinator of curriculum, a coordinator of computers, a director of buildings and grounds, and a director of an externship program. I believe all of them make over $50,000. One or two perhaps may make a little less. Most probably make between $55,000 and $75,000. And they will be joined on July 1 by Dr. Zimmerman, so a total of 8 administrators on that level. As a reference point, 20 years ago when this high school opened, you had a staff of 3 administrators. It consisted of Mr. Gray, the superintendent, Mrs. Felt, who was the business manager, and Gary Baker had just come on board as the assistant principal for curriculum. Now, I certainly recognize that our affairs are more complicated now, but I would submit to this group that none of these people are indispensable. I believe jobs can be eliminated and functions consolidated. For instance, over the past year, our business manager and our personnel director were given $10,000 stipends and did their jobs plus the superintendent's job. Now on July 1, we'll have 3 people doing those 3 jobs. We have a business manager and we have a coordinator of business. What's the distinction between those jobs? Dr. Zimmerman comes to us with strengths in curriculum and computers. So the question, do we need a coordinator of curriculum and a coordinator of computers? I'm trying to be polite about the next item. The coordinator of computers, that is filled by a gentleman who was moved out of the vice principalship into the high school and moved into this particular slot. I don't think he has any expertise in computers. There are computer people in each of the buildings in the school system that do the actual computer work. But this fellow probably makes around $60,000. Dr. Zimmerman herself comes from a system in Easton that's approximately the same size as our system. They spend about $1,000 less per pupil than we spend here. Her support staff, if I'm correct, consists of 2 other administrators. Now, there may be additional support staff below that, but I don't think they number the 39 that are listed in the handbook that the central office puts out, and they number the people, so I've counted right. Now, in flush times, as in business, you can have ideas to bring in people and create positions with new ideas. We can't really do that anymore. As somebody said to me recently in industry, gee, we chopped administrators, we found the work went away with them. Now,
Excuse me, sir. How much longer do you intend to speak?
Excuse me? About a minute.
Okay.
I raised these issues at a school committee meeting several weeks ago when I spoke in support of a petition by the teachers, the high school teachers, 90 of them signed it up, looking for real central office cuts. I would ask the school committee over the next 2 months to roll up their sleeves and beat the bushes and go out and talk with the faculty of each of our schools and find out what they think of the central office staff, their interactions, how they rate their usefulness, how they size up their functions. And I think you're going to be very surprised, but I think you owe it to us because you're our leaders and we elected you to do these things. Now, the central office with the override may be home free this year. But come next year, when we have to go back for another override, I'll lead a charge, and we're going to have to take a hard look at those functions if those are not dealt with over the next couple of months. Thank you.
We've been debating this for about an hour now, and what I would ask is if people have something significant to add, then or a specific question to ask, please do so. I think it's close to the time we should bring this to a vote. I'm going to recognize the lady. Were you standing first? Go ahead, sir, Mr. Ahern.
Dennis Ahern, Central Street in West Acton. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would hate to be cut off I think it's gratifying to see how many people have come out tonight and last night as well to sit here and try to listen to some very difficult issues and to deal with them and make some important decisions for the town. It's not easy to do, and it's really gratifying to see the turnout. However, it's unfortunate that we're faced with a decision between a mare's nest and a pig in a poke. I've seen positions put up and told, well, it's not really any new money because it's money we're taking from some other pocket. This is the nature of the bottom line budget that we bought into a couple of years ago at town meeting. Now, granted, it has streamlined the process. It's taken a lot of stuff off the table, and we haven't had to deal with it, and it can be tiresome to go line item by line item. But I think this only really works if it's done fairly, and I don't think we have been well served this time. I keep hearing about this or that thing was approved by the coordinating committee, or this is recommended by the coordinating committee, or we are going to adhere to the decisions of the coordinating committee. Now, you can look in the town report, and despite Article 2 of the warrant, I have not heard any report from the so-called coordinating committee. Now, I don't know how we evolve this shadow government of the town that meets at 7:30 on a Monday morning to discuss what we will or will not continue to fund. But I have to work for a living, at least this month, and I can't make it to 7:30 a.m. meetings. I think that is not in keeping with the spirit of the open meeting law. And if the coordinating committee is going to be the arbiter of whether we have a library in West Acton or whether we have a personnel manager to manage all the new layoffs, I think people ought to have some input on this, and I think we are ill-served by this method of budget.
Let's see if we can only have new material. Gentleman, microphone 1.
My question, I have a specific question. The question has to do with the mechanism available to people, for someone who... my question has to do...
Would you introduce yourself too, please?
I'm sorry, my name is Gary Pavlik. I live on Madison Lane. My question has to do with the mechanism available to people who, I've been told that there is one, who have demonstrated need, who do have a problem, they can have their taxes abated, not just the delta, the increase for the year, but part or all of their taxes available. I understand that there is an alternative to them because everything's delivered here like there aren't any alternatives. I know there's no alternative to me. If the school system deteriorates, I just move or send my kids to school for $12,000 a year. But could someone please tell us about that mechanism?
Mrs. Tavernier.
There are several mechanisms, but the majority of them are available to people who are 65 or older or people who are veterans. However, there is one that permits taxpayers to defer up to 100% of their taxes, and that mechanism is a lien is put on their property. However, that again is for someone who's 65 and they have had to have lived in Massachusetts for 10 years and lived in that property for 5 years. There is another clause that our town has used in the last couple of years, Clause 18, in which it reads that you have to be, see, there are a couple of interpretations. You have to be aged, infirm, and impoverished. There's another interpretation of the law that says you can be aged, infirm, or impoverished. Some boards of assessors have taken that to mean they can use discretion in terms of age, but certainly not in terms of poverty. And there is a possibility of some relief in that area, but it's quite rare, and in fact, there was just a recent court ruling, DOR is not terribly in favor of it, but it's loosely interpreted in the law as the problem. But generally, relief is available if you're 65 and older and have an income problem.
The gentleman at microphone 1 again.
Is this a real mechanism that actually gets used, or is it just something written down that no one ever hears about?
It's used very little. We do publicize the information. There are pamphlets. It's regulated by state law. You can't, as a community, just decide to do this. It's an enabling legislation by state law, and in some of these cases, the state will reimburse the towns for the relief that is given so that you're not losing revenue. But in actuality, there are less than 24 applications last year. 18 of those were approved. That's just on the Clause 18. There would be more in elderly, but really always less than 50 probably. It has, again, a stigma, and people don't like to have a lien put on their home, so it's not a terribly useful procedure from that regard.
I can understand the stigma, but the point I was trying to make is that these folks do have an alternative. They don't have to lose their home. They can get their whole tax bill abated if they just demonstrate need.
Yeah, demonstrating need, and their income requirements is, their limit has to be $20,000. So, I mean, they have to qualify.
The lady at the microphone 3.
Dorothy Campbell, 34 Robin Street. I have two questions for the Board of Selectmen that I would like to have answered. First of all, you mentioned that one person in the planning board was cut in the B budget and that person would be restored if the override went through. I had occasion to have a long conversation with people in the planning board recently, and I asked about that position, having read that in the green sheet that came out. I was told that that position has not been staffed for 1 or 2 years. I can't remember exactly what. And I'm wondering how you can cut a position that isn't staffed and save money and then add the position back in and spend it.
That budget is, that position is unfilled at the moment because of a resignation over a year ago. We held off filling that this year because we knew it would be a B budget cut and felt it wouldn't be fair to bring someone on, potentially who would be laid off again a few months later. That would have been filled had the override passed.
However, you didn't spend that money last year.
No, that's correct.
So you
and
can't-
that we turned back $200,000 to free cash last year, and that's just the type of area where that came from.
So you can't cut someone you didn't have.
You can. You're cutting funds out of the budget. You can't fill that position if you've cut that salary.
Right, but you can't save money. You didn't spend the money, so you're not really losing. It's just a way of discussing these numbers that I think most people understand where I'm coming from. It's very difficult to make any sense of it.
There's turnover in all the organizations, and any given time you have retirements, resignations, you're in between hiring people.
Second question, there's been much discussion tonight about getting back to the line item budget. I wish the Board of Selectmen would explain to me, A, how we got away from it, what legally we did to get away from it, and B, what legally we can do as town voters to force the Board of Selectmen and the school committee to get back into it.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Tappan.
I'm glad you asked the question because I think it's very important that everyone here understand if you're talking about a line item budget, you're only talking about the town, the municipal budget, because the schools don't have to have a line item budget. They are permitted by state law to have a bottom line budget. And if you think a line item budget would be everybody's budget, that is simply not the case. The way we came to a bottom line budget is it started in 1990. The town presented a 9-line item budget to town meeting with the Finance Committee's endorsement, and it has passed ever since then. So this is the third town meeting that this has been the case. Bottom line budget, excuse me. And in order to, all right, I can prepare a lot more argument for it, but I don't think the moderator wants me to.
No, I think you need to answer the question if you'd like.
Town meeting has voted the bottom line budget. They first did it in 1991.
So you're saying town meeting can vote it back in then? We would have to do that, would be a citizen article that we'd put in the town meeting?
It would have to be the motion that's read on town meeting floor. That's what determines the format of the budget.
Okay, getting back to the school budget, we used to have a line item school budget, so what you're saying is that the school committee did that at their pleasure, and if we want to force that again, we would have to vote school committee members who would do that for us? Is that what you're saying?
I'll let them answer that. That's a school question.
I've been coming to town meetings since 1975, so I can't speak before that, but for the regional schools, you don't vote a budget. What you really vote is the assessment. There's a regional school budget, let's say it's $11 million. What from that is revenue that comes into the region. Most of that revenue is state aid that comes into the regional school district. There are other revenues that come. That revenue is subtracted based on the regional school agreement. And then basically there's a charge to the town of Acton and a charge to the town of Boxborough that basically is calculated based on the student population. So what you're really voting is an assessment, and that's by state law. And basically the way that works is the towns at town meeting, Acton Boxborough being a 2-member region, can either vote yes or no on the assessment. If one of the towns were to vote no on the regional school assessment, then we would go back to another town meeting and try it again. If one of the towns were to vote no again, then the chairman of the regional school committee can call a 2-member town meeting, and whatever budget and assessments pass at that 2-member town meeting becomes the budget for the regional school district. So that's how the region works. For the local schools, again, we could get an interpretation from the council for the town, but again, you vote a bottom line budget, and basically you have always voted, and the motion that was made even as part of the omnibus budget for the local schools, you vote 3 line items for the local schools. One is an operating budget, that's where most of the money is. Another line is for Blanchard Auditorium, which is really the gymnasium that's connected to the junior high school, but that is a town building, and that has to be voted separately, the operating budget for Blanchard, and then out-of-state travel has been voted separately. So at least since 1975, I know we've had a bottom line budget for the local schools as well.
Lady at the back microphone, then Mr. Richter.
Thank you. Nancy Evans, I live on Trask Road. I've lived in Acton since 1985, since I was counseled by friends to come to Acton because of the schools. My sons both went to McCarthy Town School, and that's the item I want to talk about, because McCarthy Town and its principal taught me that the opportunities are there and wide open for me as a parent to help the school. I think if the school committee spoke a little further with some of the people involved in McCarthy Town, they would recognize the facilities that are available and the personnel that are available here in Acton on the basis of volunteering. And I don't know, I have no concept as to how many parents do actually volunteer in the schools, or how many individuals, town residents, volunteer in the schools. If they'd want to hold up their hands, I'd get an idea. That's better. Thank you. The possibilities are there to organize a corps of volunteers on a regular basis that could assist in depleting or diminishing the budget that's required for administration in the various ways that we can do it. I've spent time in the lunchroom in order to fund a third grade teacher. I recognize some other faces that have done that too, and of course we all do our field trips. But if there are ways for us to take care of extra expenses by bringing in a volunteer, it should be studied, and we certainly have the administrative staff to study and implement it. Another suggestion I would have is to perhaps look at the possibility of turning the West Acton Citizens Library into a subscription library and have it funded by the people who do actually use it, or partly funded by that method, and again reduced the full town's support of that by the subscriptions that come in. Thank you.
I'll recognize Mr. Richter. Let's see if we can bring this to a vote very quickly now. We've really discussed this for better than an hour. Mr. Richter.
That's why I want to speak. Ed Richter, Brewster Lane. I move the previous question.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second, please? All in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Opposed, say no. Debate is cut off. We'll now vote on the motion as amended. This is going to be a little bit complex because you're going to vote 4 times, one on the municipal services budget, one on the Acton Public Schools, one on the Acton Boxborough Regional School, and one on Minuteman Technical. I'm going to read you the numbers that were read in the original motion, and then I'm going to add to it as a separate number the amendment. And I have to do it that way on advice of town council because of the codicil at the end of the amendment that says it is only going in force if an election is called and it passes. So if I added those numbers to the numbers in the motion and the election didn't pass, you'd be left with a very difficult situation. So bear with me, and I think it'll be accurate. We will first vote on municipal services. $10,944,410 plus the amended amount of $219,909. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The motion is carried. B, the Acton Public Schools, as follows. Operating expense, $9,122,263. Out-of-state travel, $3,000. Blanchard Auditorium, $34,771, plus the amended amount of $207,130. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. No. Motion carries. C, Acton Boxborough Regional School District as follows. Operating budget, $7,248,912. Net maturing debt and interest, $317,763, plus the amended amount of $259,961. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. No. Motion carries. And D, Minuteman Technical School District, $648,321. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. All right, I believe I've been asked if we can present a couple of resolutions. As you know, resolutions can be presented if I'm willing to accept them. I've seen both of them. I'm willing to accept them. Whoever wishes to speak to any resolution can come up to a microphone and do it. I will take only 2 comments on each resolution. A comment by the person who makes it, who may choose to read it and make it, and then I'll take one if someone else wishes to speak to it in opposition. But that's all I'm going to take for time's sake. It needs to be seconded, and then we'll vote on it. Ms. Edry.
Mr. Moderator, Jan Edry, Neshoba Road. Should I say I want to enter a resolution and then go ahead with it?
Sure.
I'd like to enter a resolution.
Fine.
So now I go ahead and read my resolution.
Yes, please.
Be it resolved that in the spirit of restoring trust and confidence among the townspeople in their local government, we respectfully urge the Board of Selectmen and School Committee to seek new methods to present more complete and timely budgetary information prior to any votes, either at the polls or at town meeting. There should be a Finance Committee hearing before an override vote. Town reports and warrants must be available prior to an election. Coordinating committee meetings should be held in the evening instead of in the morning, and minutes should be taken. Be it further resolved that because we feel the A or B budget format is too limiting in its choices, we respectfully urge the Board of Selectmen and School Committee to consider offering more choices on override questions, such as the use of a pyramid override or alternative forms of budget proposals. Town officials should educate the public about what they are voting for and not what they would lose by voting against override questions. And be it finally resolved that with the goal being renewed unity rather than divisiveness among the townspeople, we respectfully urge the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee to stop using nomenclature that creates panic voting, such as forced transfers or resulting in closing an unspecified fire station. They should present straightforward facts and complete information on which voters can base their decision.
Do I hear a second to the resolution? Do you wish to speak to your resolution briefly?
Very briefly, the results of what I'm hearing tonight and what happened last night with the override tell me that voters, regardless of how they voted on the override, have far more in common than differences. We all want good services in our towns, we all want good schools. But we need this information ahead of time in order to make informed decisions. There's lots of meetings and lots of budget hearings, but they're all pro-override. They only tell us what we're going to lose, not what we're going to get. They create panic. The town reports telling us what was spent will be far more helpful when it comes to going to the polls rather than after we voted. The A and B budget option is so limiting and creates such polarization. And in talking with the Division of Local Services, which is a part of the Department of Revenue, there are many formats of override questions that can be presented, one of which is a pyramid override, where the voters get to decide what level they want to spend at the polls. If we feel that we would be willing, the group that I have been involved with, which is Accord, to meet with any boards who are interested in this to see if we can format questions that are more in line with what the public wants. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak to this? I'll take an opposing view if there is one. Seeing nobody standing, we'll vote. You know this is a resolutions are non-binding. All in favor of the resolution say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The resolution is carried. Yes. We have a second resolution from the Finance Committee, I believe. Is that true, Dr. Donald?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I move the following resolution. Obviously, you can't see it. First of all, I'll read the resolution, and secondly, I'll read the whereases, which constitutes. First of all, I'll read the resolution, and secondly, I'll read the whereases, which really explain the resolution. Be it resolved that the good citizens of the town of Acton at the duly constituted town meeting convened on the 26th day of April, 1993. Is that correct? It was convened on the 26th day of April or on the 12th of April?
26th.
Well, anyway, direct Pam Reeser and Bob Durand, their worthy representatives to the Great and General Court, to join forces, and this is important, to join forces with their peers from other cities and towns to 1, seek ways and means to restore the funds stricken from the cherry sheet. 2, introduce and support an amendment to the fiscal 1994 state budget to guarantee that the cities and towns receive the full $47 million growth in lottery revenues. 3, investigate whether other sources of funds may have been diverted from the towns, and if discovered, funds be redirected to the towns. This to be done speedily and with dispatch, reporting progress to the town in 4 months, September 1st, 1993. Wait a second, hold on. Mr. Moderator doesn't like that interruption. The whereases, and this really explains where we're coming from. Whereas the cities and towns of Massachusetts have been limited to 2.5% annual increase in the tax rate since the passage of Proposition 2.5 in 1981. That's about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, at any rate. Whereas the inflation rate has exceeded that 2.5 for the past 12 years. Whereas Acton's reserve funds have dwindled. Whereas the economy has faced a general decline. Whereas overrides of Proposition 2.5 are increasingly difficult to pass. Whereas the income from the cherry sheet from the Massachusetts Department of Revenue has steadily decreased. And whereas the income from the lottery was to be allotted to the cities and towns, the unclaimed bottle bill receipts, increased traffic fines, increased license fees, and other increased levies have embellished state coffers during those years. I urge the passage of this resolution.
Do I hear a second to the resolution? Is there any comment? Well, I see a representative to the Great and General Court standing here. Mrs. Reeser?
Yes, I do want to comment because I do accept this very seriously and have been working for 3 years. I must confess that the struggle has been to level fund and probably will be again this year. I wish sometimes that when you show what has happened since 1989, you would show what happened between 1980 and 1989. I want you to remember that we, the voters, and I voted against it, but we, the voters, passed 2.5. This was not something that the state, quote unquote, put upon you. It was something that the Massachusetts voters passed. And it makes a lot of sense because we need to become less dependent on our property tax. And that was the intent, I think, of most of the voters, and is still the intent, I think, of most of us, that we really share this interest in getting other resources and becoming less dependent on property tax to support local government. However, as you well know, since 1989, we have had very serious problems in terms of funding in this state. And there has been a cut. And we have struggled each and every year to maintain as much as possible the level funding of local government. And that, of course, doesn't help because, as you saw in previous graphs, and as you know, the costs still go up in spite of that fact. And so the level funding means that we've got to raise more at the local level. So it is a serious problem. And I would hope that as we become, once again, as our revenues improve, that more and more of that money will go to funding local government. And I will certainly work very hard with the senator, and I know that he shares my concern about this issue. I've been working with a group, Representative Frank Hines from Marshfield, who's been in the House for a number of years, has been very aware and traced exactly what has happened in terms of local aid and knows its history, and is working with a group of us to try to maintain and increase the level of funding. And we have tried to remove the cap from the lottery, which was put on, I think, in 1988, but I'm not sure, perhaps 1989. But we are working at that again, and tomorrow there will be a discussion of local aid on the State House floor, if you happen to be around to watch Channel 44. But we are working very hard to try and maintain or improve state support. And I will be pleased to take this resolution and work on it, and I thank you.
We'll take one more comment on the resolution. Yes, sir. Microphone 3.
My name is Dick Wagman. I live at 19 Davis Road. I, along with almost everyone in here, wish that the town had more money to work with, and I understand why people are looking towards mechanisms such as this to get more money from the state. But I think we have to acknowledge that in a time of recession, there are going to be times when the state simply, one way or another, cannot afford to fund us at levels that we like. The real problem here is that Prop 2.5, passed in 1981, has deprived us of the flexibility of deciding for ourselves whether or not we want to choose to fund these services more effectively ourselves. I think the real energies in here should go to eliminating the 2.5% cap. It always struck me that that was a rather arbitrary number, and work towards methods to deal with Prop 2.5 rather than something like this. So I think I'm going to oppose this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, all in favor of the resolution say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Resolution's carried. We'll move now to Article 11. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Tavernier.
Before we lose some people, I would like to make an announcement from the Board of Selectmen. Last night, I believe I mentioned we would be making our decision on the special election at our May 11th meeting. Tonight at our meeting, we've decided to meet next Tuesday, May 4th at 7:30 in the Town Hall hearing room to make that decision. At that time, we will take some public comment. We feel we have heard a great deal of thoughtful debate here. There perhaps is more that someone needs to tell us, and you also have the option of putting any comments in writing to us in care of the Town Hall. On an unofficial basis, a majority of the board has indicated its willingness to call a special election. And the most likely date, since it has to take place 45 days from tonight's vote, in looking at the calendar, should our decision be that, as I believe it will be, it would be Tuesday, June 8th. So I invite you to either contact any of us before next Tuesday, come to the meeting at Town Hall, or put comments in writing to us. Thank you.
It's now 9 o'clock. If I'm not mistaken, we can wind this town meeting up tonight. Article 11. Mrs. Tavernier moves to raise and appropriate $261,564 to be used in conjunction with funds appropriated to the municipal services budget for the current fiscal year, and that to raise such amount, $261,564 be transferred from free cash. Do I hear a second? Second. Mrs. Tavernier.
Yes, this is requesting a transfer from free cash to be used in this fiscal year. $100,000 of it will go into the Neswick Stabilization Fund that was described by Norm Lake last night under Article 6. And the balance, $161,564, will be transferred from free cash into the snow and ice budget. That is the total deficit. And wouldn't you know, it snowed last night, fortunately not enough to plow, and that number would have been wrong today, but the total deficit in snow and ice is $161,564, making a total of $261,564 that needs to be transferred to cover expenses in this year's budget.
Comment from the Finance Committee?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends the town should approve this resolution.
Other comment? Seeing nobody standing, we'll vote. All in favor of the motion as read, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. I'd like to thank as many people as we have here for staying. It's nice to see the room full of people participating in the democratic process. You know, in a way, though, I hate to see people come out for a night and leave halfway through town meeting. It'd be wonderful if everybody would be as committed to it as you folks are who've stayed, so thank you for staying. Article 12, Mr. Hunter moves that the town transfer $834,155 from free cash to reduce the tax rate for fiscal year 1994. Do I hear a second? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Hunter.
I'm putting this slide up, although the numbers are very simple, because the bottom number is a very significant and historical number, and I don't say that in a pleasant sense. You know, we've sat and listened to a lot of commentary tonight about the Board of Selectmen and other town officials presenting more information or more easily understood information or reorganized information or whatever. And you know, we take those comments to heart, and anybody has specific suggestions in that regard, we'd be happy to hear from you. We work with these numbers starting in the fall for many months through many meetings, and try to put them in a format that where we can bring them for you who don't spend all that time with them, understand them. This number is a number that's a little difficult. Having said all that, it's a little difficult to explain other than to say, basically we need to appropriate this much money if we're going to balance the books in the sense of the state, not in the sense of our income equaling our outgo, but to make the books come out even for the state. Basically, the Article 10 article, omnibus budget, and those numbers were based on revenue assumptions, and those revenue assumptions, even without an override, did not balance the projected outgo. The coordinating committee, this mystical body that's been meeting Monday mornings, Dr. Kessler, by the way, had a great preference for morning meetings, and he's gone, and we had already, before the commentary at town meeting, been discussing about going to an evening meeting, so I think you can think we may hear some action in that regard. But eventually, in any event, the coordinating committee working with the balance sheet started out originally with a number in the 700,000 range, which we felt, in our judgment, we could afford to take from free cash this year to make the budget come out even and get DOR approval. Through various reasons, incrementally, that number has grown to the number which has been moved, which is $834,155. All of those increments would be of great interest to an aficionado of the coordinating committee process, but I don't think I need to bore you with them tonight. The really significant number, ladies and gentlemen, is the number on the bottom. We had $1.1 million in free cash balance certified at the beginning of the year. Now remember, free cash is money in the bank plus receivables.
and your receivables, you don't know absolutely what you're going to collect, so there's some degree of projection there. Against that, you have just appropriated $261,564 to balance the books in this fiscal year, the fiscal year we are currently in. Now, this motion, the $834,155, is what we need to take out of free cash to make the books come out even for fiscal '94 on the B budget level. Look at what that leaves at the bottom. We are projecting now, on this basis, if you vote this tonight, $30,000 and change as a projected free cash balance at the end of the year. That's less than an average teacher's salary. That's the lowest point we have ever been in free cash. It was not very many years ago that we sat here, stood here, or actually over the auditorium, and debated whether we should have 3 or 4 or 5 or 1% of total operating expenses in free cash. We were always up in the 7-figure numbers. We have been retreating, as I have said innumerable times in public. We have been retreating. We have been using everything we can to hold our staffs together, to keep them at a level where we're staying the momentum of education and municipal services in town. We are retreating. This is the reason why next year is not going to be a good year. We are essentially at the bottom of the free cash barrel, and we're not going to have that anymore. So you're going to see either rapidly escalating cuts, or you're going to have to decide to pass some level of overrides in the future to fund the level of government you want, whatever level that may be. But at the moment, we recommend that you vote this so that our numbers come out and recognize that we're not going to have any free cash next year. Thank you.
Comment, Mr. Harrigan.
Mr. Moderator, in order to balance the budget, the Finance Committee recommends the passage of this amendment, or the passage of this article.
Other comment? Seeing no one standing, we'll vote. All in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Let's see, Article 13 we passed by consent. Article 14. Dealing with transfer of funds for the cemetery land fund. Mrs. Fanton moves that the town raise and appropriate $33,500 to be expended by the town manager for the design, development, landscaping, roadways, and drainage of new sections of Woodlawn Cemetery and Mount Hope Cemetery, and to raise such amounts, $33,500 be transferred from the Cemetery Land Fund. Do I hear a second? It's been moved and seconded. Mrs. Fanton.
Article 14, 20% of the amount charged for a burial is deposited into the Cemetery Land Fund, which is used for the improvement of the cemetery and its avenues, paths, and structures. The fund currently has a balance of $73,600. Article 14 will transfer $33,500 from the Cemetery Land Fund to be used for the design, development, landscaping, roadways, and drainage of new sections of Woodlawn Cemetery, which is on Concord Road in Acton Center, and Mount Hope Cemetery in West Acton. All cemetery development is based upon a long-range development plan. Woodlawn Cemetery has approximately 186 vacant lots at the back and a number of additional vacant lots scattered throughout. These are sufficient to meet the demand for 3 to 4 years. The development plan included in this article will meet the demand for at least 10 years. The area to be developed at Woodlawn is directly behind the row of trees at the back of the present soccer field. The long-range plan for Woodlawn proposes that this section be developed next because it is level, the timber value is high, and some of the fill from it will be used to fill another section in back. While the area to be developed will be cleared in order to lay it out for cemetery use, over time it will become more attractive, and this takes about 3 to 5 years just to develop the area for use. To help screen the clearing behind the soccer field, The front row of standing pines will remain, and some low shrubs planted beneath the branches. Finally, Article 14 also includes $3,500 for laying out, in other words, developing plans for a section at Mount Hope Cemetery, which has already been cleared. The Board of Selectmen asks you to support this article.
Finance Committee?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends approval.
Finance Committee recommends approval. Comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion carries. Article 15. Mrs. Tavernier moves that the town authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the General Court to enact a special law relative to discontinuing the sounding of train whistles at railroad crossing in the town of Acton that are otherwise protected by warning devices. Do I hear a second? Second. Mrs. Tavernier.
I apologize, it's me again, but at least maybe a change of scenery in terms of subject matter. The Board of Selectmen tonight is asking for your approval of a home rule petition that would ask the state legislature to enact a special law that would discontinue the sounding of train whistles at all railroad crossings in the town of Acton that are otherwise protected by warning devices. Residents in our town are suffering from the effects of trains blowing their horns at grade crossings as they travel along the 2.5 miles of track within our boundaries. Many of the residents are here tonight to tell you how annoying these horns are and how disruptive it is to their daily lives. I would like to give you a brief chronology and background on this issue. In July 1989, the town of Acton petitioned that the Department of Public Utilities order the MBTA to discontinue the sounding of whistles at all rail crossings in town. State law gives this authority to grant relief only to the DPU. A public hearing was held in Acton on September 7, 1989, at which dozens of Acton residents testified, and additional hearings were held in Boston on February 5th and April 1st of 1990, at which time the MBTA and DPU staff people testified. By September of 1991, when the town had heard nothing from the DPU in 2 years, the selectmen forced the DPU to make a ruling, which naturally was not in our favor. It wasn't going to be in our favor whether we forced them to rule on it or not, but we finally got disgusted with not being told no. The DPU denied the petition on the grounds that in Florida, when whistles were stopped, automobile accidents increased. No supporting evidence was supplied that indicated reasons for the accidents, whether there were adequate safety devices, impaired drivers, impatient drivers. If you've been in Florida, you know that there are a lot of impatient drivers because there's so many crossings, or whatever the reason. But just simply lifted from that report to ours as being the reason why we couldn't have whistle relief. Not to be deterred, last year the Board of Selectmen filed legislation through Representative Pam Reeser that would not require the sounding of whistles at all crossings that had optimum safety features. This legislation died in committee because the committee chairman, Paul Caron, who lives in the Springfield area, decided that his constituents like whistles and would be upset by the cessation of them. So this home rule petition is our last attempt to bring relief to our community. It asks that whistles not be blown at any of the 6 crossings in town. Let me give you a few statistics. We can do just as well as the Florida report. Every week, 190 passenger trains pass through our town. The horns only blow at 4 of our 6 crossings because the busiest 2 crossings in West Acton, Mass Avenue and Arlington Street, were given relief by the DPU in the mid-1950s. Of course, if you can picture the horns blowing starting at Martin Street, at Central Street, at Mass Avenue, at Arlington, and then again Central at Idlewild, the problem was they never stopped blowing. So the DPU did sympathize in the mid-50s and relieved those two crossings. Now, 300 people live within a 500-foot radius of the crossings and are directly impacted by the horns. Many homes are only 50 to 60 feet from the track. This is particularly true in the Martin Street crossing. In the past 10 years, and we have done a count, when we prepared for this hearing with the DPU, we actually did a traffic count, so we can calculate this. In the past 10 years, 70 million cars have traveled over these crossings. In the past 10 years, 99,000 trains have traveled through Acton. In this same time period, there have only been 3 accidents involving trains and cars, 2 at whistled crossings and 1 at a non-whistled crossing. Now, let me tell you about these 3 accidents with cars. 1 car slid on ice and went under the gate. That was at the whistled crossing. Whistle didn't stop that accident. 1 car went around the gate. The driver was drunk. The whistle didn't stop that accident. And the 3rd accident was a chemical truck that was left parked with his rear over the track in West Acton while he went to get coffee. That was the non-whistled crossing. Now, all of our crossings in Acton have optimum safety. The MBTA defines that as flashing lights, bells, and automatic gates covering half of the road in each direction. The MBTA has said that this crossing system provides better protection than whistles, that whistles are only a backup to this optimum system. In the event of a power failure or other electrical failure, the gates are designed to be fail-safe. They will go down when there's a malfunction. They never stay up in that situation. You need to know that the MBTA did not oppose our petition to the DPU. And of course, as part of our home rule legislation, we would expect the trains to continue to blow their whistles in the event of an emergency. Now, in terms of decibel ratings, and this is what we consider to be a public health issue, we believe the sounding of these horns is damaging to the people living in these affected areas. The decibel rating of these horns was measured in the backyard of one of the nearby homes in 1989. At that time, the decibel rating was 100. If you were standing 3 feet from your car when the horn was honked, that would be 110 decibels, as would a heavy metal rock concert. When the decibel level was tested in '89, the locomotives were only using 3 chime horns, and today they're using 5 chime horns, and the residents who are most affected have noticed a significant difference. If these were jets taking off, the FAA would agree that these horns would be considered unsafe for the residents. In the FAA's view, people are subjected to significant noise if they live within an area that is exposed to an average of at least 65 decibels over a 24-hour period. The EPA agrees that the federal guideline should also be 65 decibels as the level for protecting residents' health and welfare. But 300 of our residents are potentially exposed to 100 decibels every 17 hours on weekdays and once every 15 hours on weekends. Now, the most important message that we are making with this home rule petition is that we want to be treated with equity. We want equal access to peace and quiet, the same access that our neighbors to the east enjoy. To the east of Acton, when our train passes through the communities of Concord, Lincoln, Weston, Waltham, Belmont, Cambridge, and Somerville, there are no whistles blown at any crossing at any time. What makes these crossings so special? That's what we would like to know. They have the same optimum safety feature that we have, flashing lights, bells, and automatic gates, but no whistles. For the first 24 miles out of North Station, no whistles are blown. They only begin at 2 crossings in West Concord, and then only in one direction each one. There was no reason for the DPU to look at the history of Florida's experience. They could have looked at the Sudbury Road crossing and the Concord Depot, which has been unwhistled for 100 years, if they wanted to examine an accident record that was relevant. Our residents have endured this obnoxious noise too long. It's time to give them the peaceful night's sleep that others